And welcome back. All right, so today we're going to be talking about three different topics. We're going to go ahead and talk about PSA getting sued for what we've been thinking for the last couple of weeks or months, which is going to be monopoly. We're also going to go ahead and talk about eBay's new policy that's going to be taking into effect in May 13. And finally, the last thing that we're going to go ahead and talk about is going to be about people getting shot over Pokemon cards. Dang, 2026 and people are still getting shot over Pokemon. That's insane, right? So let's go ahead and start with the first clip.
No. You're telling me that a class action lawsuit has been filed a day after selling some of my PSA slabs. I don't believe. Oh. Oh. So yes, a man in Arizona has filed a formal class action lawsuit against PSA's parent company, Collectors Holdings. And as of the making of this video, Collectors Holdings has not responded. Basically seeking damages and anti-monopoly laws because PSA owns over 80% of the graded market, especially with their acquisition of Beckett and SGC. And this, of course, is coming off the heels of several members of Congress
Look, if we're being completely honest, I'm going to cut the video right there. Nothing's really going to happen. I'm sorry, but we're kind of in a culture right now where kind of big companies will get away with almost everything. But even then, we're not surprised where big companies buy out smaller companies and add them to their acquisitions. That's why you have certain corporation giants who kind of own like all the meat industry in the United States. Most of the automakers are owned by one company. Even whenever it comes to like our cell providers, not too long ago we had T-Mobile acquire Sprint. I mean, yeah, sure, some people didn't like those kind of moves, but here's the thing, here's the reality. PSA still has direct competitors against them. We're talking about, obviously, in this channel, we're going to be talking about Tag all the time, right? But they still got CGC, and they got some other companies like Degree, AGS, or AGS, Ace, all sorts of different grading companies. Now, while PSA has successfully done everything they can to get on top of every other company, look, people are going to try to sue, but I honestly don't think anything is going to happen. Which kind of reminds me though, not too long ago there was an episode of the Car Lounge where Robo Skills or whatever his name is. I'm sorry, I apologize. But Robo and Twice Baked Jake were talking about like how big PSA has gotten, and they asked, what would it take for PSA to fail? And honestly, that's a very good question. Honestly, I do see a lot of the things they're currently doing, they're kind of hurting their own reputation and just kind of creating a sour taste on the regular consumer, regular collector's mouth. But still, a lot of people, especially like, vending culture shops, they really put a big emphasis on PSA themselves that like they're kind of part of the problem. But what would it take for it to fail? Now, if this does happen, please don't point it on me. But I do think that something could really hurt PSA is if, like, the organized crime rob PSA headquarters. I'm just saying. Look, because we're already having like news and stories about like the Japanese Yakuza controlling the market for the Japanese booster boxes. So that's why maybe right now it is a little bit more expensive to buy Japanese cards. And that kind of sucks because I'm a big Japanese collector. That's what I really like to rip. I like to rip on a budget, get as many hits as possible. But if they're buying out or they're buying out majority of the Japanese booster boxes, so whenever people who are trying to make businesses off Japanese cards here in the United States, they have to go through people who are buying shit out of the Yakuza. Please don't kill me. Already at a higher price. So if we having we're having organized crime that level attacking this hobby, so they can launder money, why would it be too out of the question for them to actually go rob PSA at their headquarters? Look, all I'm saying, at PSA, they got an extremely big backlog. We're talking about months of cards there. They could be your cards, maybe not, right? But they got months of cards of backlogged over there. And the one thing about cards, it's outside for a couple different like TCGs, these cards aren't serialized. So them robbing X amount of cards, how are they going to be able to tell whose cards? If you see all these cards or these raw cards coming up in auctions on eBay, which we'll talk about later, why would it be like, how would you know that you're buying your own card that got robbed from before from PSA? Honestly, I do feel like that would break a lot of the trust. I wonder how PSA security is over there. But hey, I'm not. I'm just saying, like, if I'm thinking about it right now, I'm sure some other people have already thought about it, and we don't even know if there's moles inside PSA who could potentially be knowing all the codes or the security weak points where they can go ahead and give a good tip to a good friend, and next thing you know, breaking news, PSA got robbed. But that's interesting, and the reason we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic. The next topic is eBay. So eBay is going to be setting this new protection for auctions where let me go ahead and they're calling it protection auction integrity on eBay. Starting May 13, 2026, buyers in the US who win auctions on eBay will no longer see the option to cancel orders. They're doing this in order for the auctions on eBay to work best when winning bidders follow through and pay. This is going to be kind of big, and I'm going to go ahead and have one of our subscribers kind of talk about it a little bit more. We already talked about him before. He was formerly known as Classic EverQuest, but now he goes by Tag Chill. So here's Tag Chill going to go ahead and break down this topic for us a little bit more, and we'll continue picking back off his thoughts.
What up, dudes? Tag Chill here. So Dan's talking about the eBay auction integrity protection policy that's going in effect May 13th this year. Buyers in the US who win auctions on eBay will no longer see an option to cancel orders. Overall, I think this is a good thing. Interesting that it's US only because, I think a lot of issues come from overseas purchasers. Now, I don't know about auctions, but yeah, I'm pretty sure you can set it to where you only ship to within the US, but at the same time, there are these services where you ship it into the US and then they ship it overseas. So allowing people outside of the United States to bid. And if this doesn't apply to them, that is something I'm very curious about. Would like to hear something about that. This is good overall, though. Someone runs up your card, bids a lot of it. There's a lot of careless people out there who just aren't paying attention. And, they just get caught in the moment, hyped up like they're on Whatnot or something. They start bidding. They're going back and forth and all of that. Next thing you know, they win the auction. They start looking around and they're like, well, shit, there's a buy-in now for even less than I just paid on this auction. So then they get buyer's remorse and then they cancel their auction. That's no good. There's also the possibility of maybe shill bidding tracking or something. We all know shill bidding's a thing. It's in the hobby. It's on eBay. And this isn't going to necessarily stop the shill bidding, but what happens a lot with shill bidding is people fly too close to the sun. And when you fly too close to the sun, sometimes you accidentally win when you were just trying to bid up the item and get others to pay for more for it. So maybe if...
Now, honestly, whenever he's talking about, you're actually auctioning or you're bidding on the item so you can kind of like trick someone else to pay more for it. Look, if I'm going to be completely honest, maybe that would be something that I would try to do. Honestly, why? Because, I like a little bit of chaos, but, and also like, look, I'm not surprised that this is a problem that we do have in our hobby. Regardless if it's like the old vintage cards that are selling for thousands of dollars, whether if it's on Fanatics or Ken Golden's auctions, you do have people who have personal interest in this kind of hobby, who might benefit from show bidding a certain card, a specific card, so that way they can make big moves later down the road. I talked to my friends about this before. Like, whenever we're talking about the Black Label Burger Chew, right, that sold for, I believe, $20,000, the first one that sold, I was talking to my friends, it's like, only one of them sold for $20,000, but, do we really know how many of those cards were owned by one person? And look, let me use this as an example. Let's say you guys already know, you've been following the channel, that I'm buying out, collecting as many of the Shinji Kondo Oricorios as I can, right? Why? Because I really like the card. There's a deeper meaning behind the story of this card, but I'll talk about that later because that's a little bit more personal, right? But if I had these cards, if I bought like, let's say 100, right, and I graded a couple of them, and I got like at least, let's say 10 pristine 10s, right? So I already put my price in there. I've already bought 100 cards, graded 100 cards, and I got 10 pristine 10s. Now, it would be my best interest to have one of these cards sell for the highest amount. Like, I already have my buy-in cost, where we're talking about raw cards and the grading price, right? Depending on what that is, X amount of cards per how many cards are being graded. So, like, obviously, if I'm doing this kind of move and I'm willing to go into this kind of debt, is because I feel like this plan is going to work, right? And I can have another friend help me with this. I can tell them like, hey, bro, I'm about to auction off this card, right? I need your help. All I need you to do is to buy it, to auction it off and buy it at this price. And let's say $20,000, right? And he's going to be, no, that's crazy. I was like, look, listen, dude, I got $20,000 as well. I'll go ahead and give you the $20,000 so you can go ahead and auction, and buy it, right? So, the auction goes on, the shield bidding continues, just like how we were talking about it. And, someone pumps it out to like maybe 1,000, because it's a pristine 10 English promo for Shinji Kanda. Eventually I do feel like that kind of card is going to go a little bit underrated. But then, boom, someone auctions or bids $20,000 and the card sells for $20,000. The transaction goes through. Now on collector, we're going to see that card reflected for 20 grand. Right. And I'm like, okay. So he's like, okay, I just gave you $1,600 or $16,000 after fees and whatnot. And they got the card, right? Okay. I'm like, well, give me the card back. I'm going to go ahead and auction card number 2, different serialized number, for $19,000. Or, we're going to auction it off. People are already paying $20,000. We're going to see if someone can pay $19,000, $17,000, $16,000. At a bare minimum, we can pretty much get that card to go pretty high, and maybe $20,000 is too much, right? But you guys are gonna get the point, right? Card number 2 goes for like $17,000. Card number 3 goes for $16,000 or $15,000. Card number 4 goes for $10,000. Get what I'm saying? So, yeah, I know in the very beginning of this process, like, your upfront cost was pretty big, but the revenue that you're getting in from selling this card a copy, because you set the pace, you set the ground road, there's a good chance that some people, like, I'm sorry, some of you guys think like, no, that's too much of a liability, it will never work. It's like, you guys don't know. Like, you guys don't know how much money really is out there in this world. You guys really don't know how much money is in this hobby whenever they're trying to control certain cards, certain population. We already have big companies who are trying to buy out certain promo cards, right? Because they really believe on that, like the Van Gogh Pikachu. So I see this being a big issue. And like, that's why, like, I think, Tag Show, like, talking about it, like, shield bidding is a big problem. But they do, if eBay really wants to kind of crack down on this, they really have to go per account, per IP address, because it's going to be very easy to create different usernames, different profiles who have never won or never bid in an auction, but they're throwing humongous numbers behind these cards. So, I mean, that's something to think about. Now, let's continue with what Tag Show has to say.
I think there needs to be some buyer protection as well. Like, how many times, opposed to this rule, how many times have you had where a buyer will you'll win the auction, you'll win something, and then the buyer cancels on you. This is the opposite side of the spectrum. Instead of the seller canceling on you, the buyer cancels on you, says it's out of stock, something like that. Or they thought they had 5, but they actually only have 2. Some stuff like that. I don't know. It happens to me quite often, I would say. And if it happens to me a handful of times over the course of a year, I'm sure it happens to everybody a handful of times over the course of the year. So I think there should be some sort of repercussions for that, or something, just some sort of protection for the buyer as well. Now, if they don't have it, they don't have it. Mistakes happen. But maybe if there are, trends of this or patterns of this with a seller, because, I have heard stories, especially when you pre-order something, maybe on eBay, and then by the time the street date comes, that thing is worth twice as much. You'll see what happens is a lot of the sellers will cancel your orders. Next thing you know, they're selling it for twice as much, and it's pretty blatant when they're doing something like this. But back to the subject at hand, the protection for the auction integrity on eBay. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a step in the right direction. But honestly, I think there's a lot more that they need to do, a lot more that they need to look at, and it's kind of weird that it's only for US only. Hopefully it's US auctions. It says buyers in the US, but hopefully it's US auctions. Because if somebody could just be in another country just shill bidding or doing crazy bids on you, then what's the point? I don't even see the point. Anyways, that's gonna be it. Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully that worked for you there, Dan. Tag shill out.
And look, I think he has an absolutely good point whenever we're talking about buyer protection. And because, look, I think we might have just finished experiencing the last Pokemon Center drop where you didn't have to win the lottery, your email lottery, to order like any kind of Pokemon product online. With that being said, now that there's not a guaranteed way for you to get these Pokemon Center ETBs, I do believe that going forward, even if these sets aren't as strong, their prices are going to go that much higher because there's going to be more of a random factor. So it's going to be a lot harder to get these ETBs in a certain area because there's a group of people who kind of work together to try to get these ETBs, getting multiple copies. At work, I do it. We got Scalper Chris, we got Ripping Robert, and we also got B Ryan Kisser. We got all these guys who are really trying to always get Pokemon Center stuff, right? So we all have like our own different methods of seeing whenever the server goes live. Some of them have Discord. I don't. It was never a phase. He goes live. I see that notification. I jump in there and I tell my friends, right? But we have 4 people, at least in my work, who are trying to get Pokemon Center ETBs. And honestly, we're pretty successful on it because even though we are working, we do work for the post office. The moment that we're on the street and we get the notification, we get online and we're still doing our thing. We're still walking, delivering our routes. We're still driving. We're still doing our job. So it's very easy for us, even though it's a very hands-on job, to be on the phone waiting on the line. Now that the line is no longer going to be the real thing, it's going to be by a lottery, then you're going to see a lot of people who are going to try to pre-sell these Pokemon Center ETBs, and they're going to try to sell it to you, but at a lower price. So whenever the price actually hits the market, they might be trying to sell you an ETB for $150, a Pokemon Center one, but whenever the true price really hits and people are paying $300, don't be surprised if they cancel the order. So you lost your pre-order and then they re-list it for $350, so they mark up the price. So I do agree here with Tag Show 100%. Not only do we need to have seller protection with the last auctions, we also got to have buyer protection, because there are people in this hobby who are trying to get whatever they can out of you. They're trying to burn you. They're trying to get every single whatever they can out of you because there's money in this hobby. A lot of people is. And going back to the first part about the international shield bidding, he makes a point. If this is just US auctions, what is it going to change anything? Look, organized crime works together. There's no reason to think that maybe there's transactions being done from organized crime from other syndicates, right? Big ballers, right? Overseas, working with United States, big ballers, whatever you want to call it. Let's call it the mafia, right? We got the Japanese mafia working with the US mafia. We got the Italian mafia working with the US mafia for big transactions. This is the way they're moving money, but they're doing it with shield bidding just because they got access to some of these rare cards. So that's what I'm saying. Honestly, now that you really think about it, how crazy would it be if the mafia does rob PSA and then all of a sudden we're having these cards auction off for crazy amount of money, but every single card is going overseas? That should give you an indication that maybe organized crime is really moving some money, no longer wire transactions. Maybe they're doing some online transaction using Pokemon. It's not too crazy to think about that, right? But I do want to go ahead and thank Tag Show. Like I said, I talked to him a lot about some of the bigger topics in the Pokemon world. Whenever we're talking, we're talking about pricing, we're talking about things that maybe collectors should be aware of, things that we want to make sure that our kids, our friends, our coworkers are not getting burned, especially if they're jumping into this hobby brand new. But that's just kind of some of my thoughts. Now, for the last one of the last parts that I want to go ahead and talk about this in this video is that, yeah, apparently people are still getting shot at stores for Pokemon product, and that is crazy. Because, like, okay, look, currently right now, what's worth getting shot over? Like, we have some Ascended Hero ETBs, we have Ascended Hero product, and maybe Ascended Hero is gonna go down as one of the best sets, like, in the Pokemon era. I do believe that it's gonna be better than Evolving Skies per se, right? And whenever we're talking about the new modern cards, just because Ascended Heroes is so Gen 1 focus, it really is. So I do see Ascended Heroes being better than Evolving Sky. Is it going to be better than Tag Team? I don't know. Like, Tag Team, like, I know a lot of people are really into the hobby, like, right now, and they talk about Ascended Heroes, Destined Rivals, 151. But Tag Team and the combo of the Pokemons, like, people want tag team cards back, and where people are hoping that we get some tag team cards in the 30th anniversary. And look, and if we do get tag team cards in the 30th anniversary, then just know that those are the cards that you should be going for, because those are going to be the most expensive cards that we'll probably be getting in this hobby and this current bull run, right? But also, like, I know probably, look, my channel ran really good for a couple months, because I feel like this is where I'm gonna fall off for saying this comment. But how funny would it be if the one who did the shooting was the little perfect order kid? You know, the one that we talked about the last channel saying in the perfect order. You know, I'm not gonna say like how funny, right? But like, you know, if we're talking about organized crimes, like, what if the kid was the one who did the shooting? You know, that would be insane. You never know. We are in the United States, so, you know, kids shooting other people in this place, you know, it's not out of the ordinary, unfortunately. And that's the crazy part, that we live in this world, right? But look, before we end the episode for today, let's go ahead and read some of the comments that I've gotten in the last episode that I really did appreciate. These are the comments that kind of make me feel like really good, like I'm building a really good community, just because of stuff that I see like this. The first comment that I want to go ahead and read is going to be from Zombie Bestie. He or she said, sorry, I don't want to assume, right? But Perfect Order was the first set I've been able to buy in stores in the past year. It's fun to rip again. And like, here's the thing, if scalpers don't want it, if your regular investor bro don't want it, and even some of your collectors don't want it because it doesn't have a high value, go ahead and buy this set and rip it to your heart's content. It's going to be one of the cheapest sets that we're going to be able to rip for a while. This Journey Together, you know, some people used to say like Shrouded Fable was super easy to rip or super cheap, but Shrouded Fable wasn't really printed for that much. And like, packs of that set is going for like $10. So you're seeing sets like Shrouded Fable and like Stellar Crown beating other big sets like Twilight Masquerade. And look, Twilight Masquerade, it was only getting carried by the Greninja. What set are we about to get that is only getting carried by a Greninja card? Chaos Rising, right? So like, I do see that correlation together, but I'm really happy that people are really ripping this product and they're enjoying it, because they actually get to enjoy the hobby how the hobby was meant to be enjoyed, buying items at retail price and just ripping it for you with your friends and your family, right? Devon Lad commented, love Starmie, I love Darkrai, haven't been in Pokemon since I was a kid. I've been really enjoying ripping and master setting Perfect Order. Forgot to follow up with Darkrai a bit, but I'm super stoked for Pitch Dark set. Look, Gen 1 does a lot of work. If you want to always determine the value of a set, look at how many Gen 1 Pokemons are in that set. 151 is as good as it is because it's 151. Destined Rivals, yes, it's getting carried a lot by the Mewtwo and some of the art, but even though, like, we also acknowledge that set is kind of being carried because there's no more booster boxes being printed, it's still a Gen 1 heavy set. Ascended Heroes is extremely Gen 1 heavy. Gen 1 heavy, like Gen 1 heavy sets really carry, like they really carry the weight. So if you ever want to look at like a bad set, just look at how many like Gen 1 sets there is in there. I mean, Gen 1 Pokemon aren't in there. And if you want a cheap set, go after that. But, here's another perfect order fan. They love Starmie. Starmie or Patrick the Star is a memeable card, and like you guys understand the power of memes. We see it. People become famous because of memes. Taichi also commented like that would be psychological crazy psychological warfare if the crappy hits from power packs were CGC and chase cards were PSAs. Implementing the idea further that CGC slabs are junk and low value. Actually a wild thought. And he's kind of agreeing me with something that I said. Like, if PSA wants to be number one and they're introducing the power packs, and the power packs is a product that they control because they are grading their own cards and they're selling them to consumers with whatever grade they want without any kind of proof, right? I wouldn't be surprised if PSA starts selling CGCs, like they put CGC packs or slabs in these power packs, because they already sell them in the eBay's auction, and like in eBay's PSA vault, they already sell CGC slabs there. They let other people sell their CGC slabs there, right? So it wouldn't be crazy if they really put like CGC slabs to make you really feel like, oh yeah, I got a slab. But it's a CGC slab, that would really hurt, right? Because you're buying a PSA product and you're not even getting a PSA slab. That would really hurt, like your mentality, knowing that you really didn't win. Look, I'm not saying that CGC is horrible. I have CGC slabs. I think they look by far better than PSA, right? But the vendor community doesn't agree. And they believe that CGC has definitely gotten a lot worse throughout the couple years. They had a couple scandals on themselves, so they lost their value. Honestly, if you guys see blue label CGCs, I would say kind of collect those or go after those, because those were probably the cards that were harder to grade. Like, those were graded a lot harder than the new modern CGC slabs. I'm just saying, right? And then the last comment that I want to go ahead and read is, I take it there. They commented that 95 collectors will stop buying Pokemon if no resale. Like, if they have no resale value, I'm assuming. And look, I don't think that 95% of the collectors are collecting because that's what they like to do. It's not about reselling. Sometimes it's about making trades. But I think, if you're going to make a statement, the right way that you should make that statement is, I believe that maybe some collectors will stop buying Pokemon if there's no value in there. And there, I would agree. Saying 95% of collectors, you're giving a very objective measure to how many collectors out there will stop collecting, right? If you want to make a good statement, a good comment per se, just say collectors will stop buying Pokemon if there's no resale value. And I would agree with you there, because I do feel like a lot of the people who are masking themselves as collectors, and they're only really in it for the value. They don't want to say they don't want to call themselves investor bros. They don't want to be called themselves scalpers, But if you're in the hobby because you found out how much money there is in this hobby and you're trying to make some money for yourself, look, call yourself a collector all you want. You most likely have scalper mentality. And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with having a scalper mentality. There's nothing wrong with trying to use something to better your life, right? I'm not disagreeing with that. It is okay. If it wasn't for the mentality, there's certain products, certain companies that we wouldn't have currently with us if it wasn't for this. But I like that comment, because they're very, strong and affirmative. 95% of the collectors would stop. Well, I mean, I like it. That's a wild take. I think that's even more wild than what I would personally say, right? But I do appreciate your thought, because I do feel like some collectors, you're doing the right thing. You're calling out collectors, but you're really calling out, scalpers who are disguising themselves as collectors. Now, I did have a couple of people DM me separately, and they're asking they think personally that I'm a scalper over a collector. And That's hard to say. Look, I don't think you're wrong for having. I don't think you're wrong for knowing how much value your collection is worth, and whenever it's a good opportunity to make money. My advice for you guys, like I'm talking to you guys, like if I was talking to my son, and like, hey, if we're not talking for whatever reason, but you're into the Pokemon hobby because I introduced you into this, look, whenever the hobby is hot is whenever you sell, right? Whenever we're hitting all-time highs. Currently, like again, like right now, we're hitting some of the all-time highs, and I do feel like after maybe Chaos Rising, and depending on how good or how bad that Dark Rise set is gonna be, we might cool off a little bit because prices are becoming a little bit stagnant, and it only takes a scandal to really bring down the hobby. But make your money whenever the market is up. The market is up right now and it's holding steady. So there are certain products that you can sell off, make your money. So whenever things come crashing down, you can go ahead and collect that kind of stuff. A lot of my collection, a lot of my PSA slabs that whenever I was really starting getting some big bowl money and started collecting, a lot of my PSA slabs were bought whenever they were low. And now that the hobby's going all over again, going hot all over again, it's a good time that I was like selling some, trading some, so I can increase the value of my seal collection, so I can do it all over again, because there's certain cards that I really want in my collection, right? So, like, am I a collector? Am I a scalper? I don't know. It's hard to say. It's like, right, where's the line? Either you're black and white, right? You can be both. You can be none. You can enjoy the hobby. You can enjoy the hobby because there's money into it. Like, it's up to you. It's really up to you, right? I do think that, like, the hobby right now, I think the hobby is probably at its best whenever there is money involved, because you're seeing all sorts of people getting into the hobby. You're seeing celebrities getting into the hobby. You're seeing how many of your coworkers are getting into the hobby. Some of your coworkers might be getting into the hobby because of the money, but then whenever you start talking to them, you realize that, oh shit, no. And they know their Pokemon history. They know their Pokemon games. It's just like maybe some people still carry the stigma that Pokemon's not cool. But I don't know why people still think that. I mean, for most of us, like who we are millennials, I think most of us played Pokemon Go. And Pokemon Go during 2026 was freaking goated. And like 10 years now, the hobby, it might be a little bit controversial, but like the hobby is goated too. Like it's insane. Like it's 10 years apart. And like 10 years from now, whenever we're going to have the 40th anniversary, like if I'm still doing this, or if I come back just to cover the 40th year anniversary, like do videos like this all over again, like that would be super goated too, because it just shows that Pokemon is here to stay. And if Pokemon's here to stay, don't be surprised if you see all sorts of different Pokemon, entertainment now. We see it on TikTok, we see it on Instagram, we're seeing it on YouTube. I do appreciate every single view that I get. I do appreciate every single comment that I get, every single subscriber, everything. I do appreciate it because the hobby is so much fun regardless. And like the fact that I get to talk about it with you guys is probably one of the best things to do. But outside from that, I really do hope that you guys having a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time. Oh, what the sorry. Time out. Outside from that, I hope you guys having a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.